I thought today we could take a walk down memory lane, and I wanted to kind of run through my personal style journey, essentially focusing on the age of 18 through to now, which essentially spans 18 years. And because I've been sharing my outfits on the internet that entire time, I have a really good record of what I was wearing throughout that period, and allows me to kind of get a really good analysis, a really good sense of how things have shifted and how those have correlated with specific trends and also points and periods in my life. And I'm going to pop some early photos on screen now, but I'm going to talk about them in a little bit more detail very soon, just so you can get a sense of where I started and then comparing that to how I dress now. So you can see there's a really big difference. And I will probably look down a few times just so I can refer to some of the pictures. But there were a few main things that really stood out to me. One, I think that trends and our personal style are more interlinked than we actually consider. I think we tend to consider more so the season of our life that we're in, the climate, and also where we live, our interests, our memories, how those bond and shape how we like to dress. However, I've noticed just from actually tracking what I've been wearing over the last, almost 2 decades, that I can see a correlation between the trends of the time and how those also heavily influence what I consider to be my own personal style. And to me, this is a very interesting discourse to be having, and I'm curious to know what you think down in the comments. There are a few other factors as well that influence how we dress, like our age, youthfulness. I think when we're younger, we're more likely to experiment with the boundaries of our personal style, and also the social psychology around how we dress and how we want to be part of a group, how we want others to perceive us. Maybe it's the fantasy self that we are trying to project. Maybe social norms are influencing the way we dress, and also the perceived formality for items and how we let that inform how we wear certain things. Today's video is in partnership with Linjer, who are celebrating their 10th anniversary this month, and it's actually wild to think that I have been wearing the brand for that long. And actually, I was going back through my archives, and I can see that it was in July of 2019 that I first started wearing Linjer jewelry, but I was wearing their bags before that. And the fact that I still have those Linjer hoops, I actually still have all of those original jewelry pieces and they look immaculate, is such a good example of the high quality standard of Linjer products, both across their gold vermeil and their 14 karat gold pieces. But it has just been so special to be able to support a brand that I have basically seen grow over the years. Jen and I also entered motherhood at the same time, which I think is a really special thing to share with someone who you really admire. There are so many things I love about Linjer as a brand, but talking about their 14 karat gold range in particular, which is probably my favorite, I love the soft creamy hue. I think it is so elegant and refined. The fact that the gold is actually 100% recycled, it is hypoallergenic and nickel free, so it's not going to cause any allergic reactions, something I'm really mindful of as I do have eczema and dermatitis on my hands, and so being able to wear jewelry that isn't going to cause me any issues, any reactions is very, very important. I also really love the fact that all of their diamonds and emeralds are conflict free as well. So they use lab grown diamonds and lab grown emeralds within their collections, and they are visually, chemically, and physically exactly the same as a mined gemstone, but without any uncertainty about its origins. So I do just want to quickly share with you some of the new pieces that I've added into my jewelry collection. So we'll start with earrings. So we've got the 14 karat gold Clements twist huggy earrings, which are so cute. And I love that these add that little bit of texture near your face. I think these are a really great update to your classic huggy hoop earring. And then next to that, I'm wearing the Ever small bold hoop earrings. And these ones are in the gold vermeil. So these are sterling silver base with the gold vermeil on top. This is a minimum of 2.5 microns thick, which is 10 times thicker than flash plated jewelry. And I think this illustrates well the difference in tone between the gold vermeil and the 14 karat gold, in case you were curious. And then the other piece that I have is the Halla scattered diamond ring. This is in the 14 karat gold, and gosh, this is absolutely exquisite. And the second that I saw it, I immediately thought of Galadriel in Lord of the Rings, and it kind of tied back to my upbringing growing up in New Zealand in Wellington, having so many friends who actually worked at Weta Workshop, wagging skulls so that I could go and watch the red carpet and see all the celebrities from the film walk down it in their absolutely fabulous gowns. It just brought back so many memories, and I kind of like that it is a slight nod to this particular time in my life. And you can see I'm wearing some of my other Linjer favorites as well, including the 14 karat gold box chain necklace with the birthstone charms. I also have on the Evelina ring with the Miriam ring and also the Elsa ring Lux. They really do pair so beautifully together. Linjer are running special offers for their 10th anniversary, and you can use my code, which I have on screen and in the description box below, in order to get a little bit of an additional discount. I also have an edit of all of my favorite pieces linked in the description box below as well, in case you would like to go and see which pieces I would recommend. You know I love the Mathilde, those are always going to be on there, but thank you so much to Linjer for partnering with me on this part of the video, and I'm curious to know if you had a particular favorite piece. So let's wind back, go back to when I was 18 years old, and let's start to talk about my personal style journey. Now, I think it's really important to note that from the age of 11, I had a school uniform. And so 5 days out of 7, I was wearing my uniform to school. I'd come home, I'd wear it until bedtime. So the only time I was actually wearing my own clothes was on the weekend. I had very little focus on fashion beyond having a handful of things. I had a dresser and I didn't even fill that up. That is how little clothing I actually owned. It was incredibly minimalist from that perspective. It was actually when I was 17, so I was in year 13 at school, we had mufti, which meant I could wear anything that I wanted, and that was when I started to kind of, I guess, take more of an interest in fashion. I'd always been interested in it from sewing with my grandmother at a young age, but this was when I really was able to, I suppose, use some more of my disposable income. I got a job when I was 14, so worked the entire way through. So having that income, I could spend it on clothing if I wanted to, and I definitely did. So I'm gonna set the scene for you. It's the early 2000s, it's bubblegum pink everywhere. Paris Hilton is setting the trends. There's a lot of low-rise, but also we're seeing this shift into the blogging era where vintage is having a revival, and also there's a lot of maximalist prints. Now, one of the things I remember specifically finding really hard to track down were good trousers. So you'll notice that pretty much every single outfit that I wore, I was wearing a skirt or a dress, or failing that, I was wearing skinny jeans. And this is because I just felt like pants did not suit me because I couldn't find the right cut. And this is also down to what is available in stores, and we are lucky now because there is just so much more choice than what used to be available back then, even though I did a lot of my shopping online almost 2 decades ago. So I wore a lot of things that were pinched in at the waist and then had that nice A-line silhouette. And basically I figured out that that was one of my best silhouettes to wear as someone who is a little bit more pear-shaped and does have a wider hip. There were also those common youthful style tropes, so think a lot of ruffles. There is this pastel printed top that is specifically I have fond memories of, despite the fact that it completely washed me out. I even had a shirt in the same fabric, and neither of those were great on my complexion, but still very, very fun to wear. But ruffles were a really big thing for me, both on sleeves, on the body of a top, on the skirt. I also really loved a polka dot, and this continued for a very, very long time. But very common style themes seem to be present in most of my 20s and actually leading up until my early 30s. One thing I also noticed is that there was a little bit of a sculptural component in a lot of the items that I chose. And I don't think that this was necessarily intentional, but more that I was really exploring the boundaries of fashion, and I loved seeing how different things looked. I wasn't afraid to bring in that drama with my outfit. And another thing that I realized that I was very much influenced by was And Minimalist, particularly around the age of kind of 21 to 22. There were a lot of references, and I remember being obsessed with those lace-up sandal boots, which I eventually got my hands on, but they just did not suit me, unfortunately, though I was obsessed with those. I remember going to LA and trying to track them down, even though realistically they were way, way, way out of my budget. I think back then they were around 1,200 New Zealand dollars, which was a lot of money to spend on one item in my closet. Another thing that I really noticed is that I wore a lot of heels, particularly platforms, and a lot of this was to add that visual height, because I felt like when I was wearing heels, my legs looked slimmer, because that's really what does happen when you are elevating the legs, and this helped to bring that height through the leg, which I was lacking. So Even though I wasn't aware that I had short legs for my height, I realized that there was something that I needed to use to bring balance into my outfits, and I was using heeled shoes as the styling tool or the mechanism to be able to create that look. This was also the era of Gossip Girl, and I have to say I was heavily influenced a lot by what Blair and Serena wore on the show. And I remember I would spend a lot of time finding out what designers they were wearing and then trying to source those pieces on the pre-loved market, because I really could not afford to buy those full price, especially knowing that anything over 250 New Zealand dollars would trigger a tax and duty fee on top of the cost of the item itself. This introduced me to a lot of brands like Alexander Wang, who I wouldn't wear now, but Philip Lim, Rodarte, Parenza Schooler, Diane von Furstenberg. I really kind of opened my eyes up to the world of contemporary fashion designers rather than just the high-end luxury houses in the US. It had to have been around 2011, 2012 that I discovered the blog Dead Florette, and that definitely had a profound influence on me and the way that I viewed my wardrobe. It was around this time that I decided to cull back my wardrobe from the 250 odd items that it was. It was a bulging rail that was kind of dipping in the center, down to I think I had less than 100 items at the end of it. A lot of the things that I parted ways with were really bright, colorful items. They weren't really part of a cohesive wardrobe because I put a lot of emphasis on buying items that I just love, that I fell in love with. And there's actually someone on TikTok who talked about this, how when they were younger, they really put more of an emphasis in feeling joy in their outfits. And I think this is a really interesting distinction to make. I've never seen anyone sort of reflect on their style in that specific way. And it's definitely made me think a lot about how I dress then versus how I dress now, which is a lot more practical. I also started writing lists around this time for all the different items that I wanted to have in my closet that would form the foundation for a classic wardrobe, a timeless wardrobe. This sort of became my obsession. And I can notice now that these lists that I was writing fell into the trap of the millennial minimalist archetype. And they really do feel quite homogenized, and I think it's a good starting point. But at that time, I was considering that to be my be-all, end-all wardrobe until the end of time. So what this ended up doing was creating a wardrobe that was largely black, white, and grey. Not entirely. I still had these little smatterings of color in there, some kind of graphic prints that leaned a little bit more muted, but for the large part, black, white, and grey really defined my outfits for an incredibly long time. I did also start to explore more with tonal outfits as well. But I would say 2012 to 2014 was me exploring prints and fabrications and the way that I could create visual interest by pairing things that didn't really feel right together. And then from 2014 to 2020 was the exploration of the minimal wardrobe, guided heavily by a stereotypical capsule. I think also I really started to feel a lot less confident wearing color, and I'm not sure what drove this. Maybe it was when I paired everything back. I felt like bringing color in was a little bit scary because I created this safe space. But I do notice that I hardly ever wore color, and when I did, while I loved the item, I always felt a little bit hesitant to wear it. One thing I noticed about this time is a lot of what I was buying was actually dictated by the brands that I loved. So Karen Walker, Lover, Kate Sylvester, Philip Lim, those were kind of the core brands in my wardrobe, and I was buying things because they gave me joy, and I wasn't thinking beyond that. As I mentioned earlier, I was just buying things for the sake of buying things I loved, and then I would figure the rest out later. So through all this time, I have finished school, I've gone to university, and then I've gotten my first job working in Parliament. So I'm in more of a corporate setting, right? But I'm still playing around with my style, and I'm not letting my work dictate how I dress. And I was quite lucky to have some very lenient bosses in terms of how I dress. So looking back, some of the outfits I wore to work, maybe I would reconsider now. In 2014, my husband and I moved to Sydney. And this is really where I see the beginning of that peak minimalist style forming in my wardrobe. And this was really a bit of a consistent theme all the way through to about 2019. I also did things like the 5-piece French wardrobe challenge, where I'd only let myself buy 5 pieces over the course of a season. So I was really limiting what I was bringing in. And that meant that I was focusing on items that were classic, timeless, so that they would be something I would wear for a really, really long time. One thing I did love though was a playful, fun, quirky shoe, Charlotte Olympia being my go-to brand and still is one of my most loved brands for shoes over the years. The kitty flats, I mean, I got those in 2016, still wearing them now, almost a decade later. So what you'll see is a lot of polka dots, a lot of black and white, a lot of stripes. I wore skinny jeans with just about anything without thinking about the silhouette and the proportions. I also started to incorporate trousers as I was exploring different silhouette styles that would work for me, and I found a few pairs that actually fit my body well, which I'd always struggled to find previously. Now in late 2019, I became pregnant, and this really changed my perception of style, and I have to say I really struggled with the identity shift. One, with my body changing so rapidly, I didn't really know how to dress. It was also summer, it was so hot. So what I ended up wearing a lot during that time, I don't think was necessarily overly reflective of my style, even though in that moment, I tried to convince myself that it was. It was hyper feminine dresses for the most part, all those tiered dresses, which were kind of all the rage, Mateau and Mal kind of being the key brands for those sorts of styles. And I have to say, I really did shop a lot at this time underneath the guise of buying things for after my son was born. And a huge part of this was not only the identity shift, but also grappling with the idea that I was going to become a mum, which is kind of a scary thing when you're living in a city where you don't really have any familial support, but also you're doing it without your mum in the picture. Because my mum passed away in 2015. So that was a really hard thing for me to have to try and navigate on my own, and it felt quite lonely from that perspective. I talked to my yaya a lot about things. I asked her so many different questions, and I was so grateful to have her there, that maternal figure. But it definitely felt like I was trying to mask those emotions by shopping, by trying to kind of avoid thinking about them. When I look back at my outfits from 2020, I have to say that I don't really see a lot of myself in what I wore, and I think a large part of this was that identity crisis that I was having of becoming a new mum, because basically your entire reality does change overnight. And I was grappling with this new sense of self while also trying to incorporate elements of my personal style pre-kids that were just wildly impractical. Wearing silk with a baby, I mean, not my best choice. And while I now have washable silk, which feels a lot more carefree, the silk pieces that I was trying to wear were ones that I would want to take to the dry cleaner. And so I really don't know what I was thinking, but I think I was just trying to make fetch happen, and it just was not fetching, if you know what I mean. But I sense this confusion really in what I wore and what I reached for, and I felt discombobulated. I was following a lot of mums who live by the beach, so I was trying to incorporate these boho beachy vibes into my outfits, which are not me. I do not live by the beach. I live in a suburban area, so not even reflective of my surroundings. And I think that's also an important part of your style and how you dress. And you know, it wasn't until mid 2021 that I felt like I was starting to regain that sense of self when it came to style, and that's when I fell pregnant with my daughter. And I really leaned in on the oversized trend during this time, as it allowed me to conceal and keep my pregnancy private, which was what I chose to do the second time around. That was what felt right for me in that moment. And I know it came as a really big surprise when I shared that I had a daughter as well the following April. So this kind of continued through 2022 and also partly into 2023. And I noticed that since then, there's been a real shift towards refined yet relaxed silhouettes. And I often feel best in a full length pleat front pant that has a little bit of a drape to it. I like the movement, and movement is something that I talk about a lot as having a considerable appeal to me. It's why I love a pleated skirt, and I'm always kind of eyeing them up. I've been more open to color. I tend to opt more so for desaturated tones, as I like a more muted contrast in my outfit as opposed to outfits that are high contrast, despite my dark features and having lighter skin at the moment, because I try to avoid going out in the sun so I can look after my complexion. I do also love a deep jewel tone, something that is more darker, a little bit more mysterious. And then I love pops of red. If you follow me on Index, then you'll see that I quite often incorporate a red bag, a red shoe, maybe a red shirt, something like that here and there to kind of bring my outfits to life. The other thing is that I'm a lot more practical. I'm considering how easy items are to maintain. I have to say, with one kid, you can wear things that are a little bit more precious. When you have two, all bets are off. I'm lucky if something lasts half an hour after I've gotten dressed without getting a mark on it, because my kids will grab at me and they'll have grubby fingers or something will happen. And pre-kids, not an issue, but now it's something I'm constantly mindful of, because I know at the end of the day I'm gonna have to put my clothing in the washing machine, and it needs to make sure that it can hold up and stand up to that. It needs to be robust, and it needs to be in a fiber that is easily machine washable. And what this has meant is that I've had to compromise on some things. So for example, some of my favorite trousers are from Dish and they're polyester. And in the past, I would have always tried to find these in a natural fiber. But what I like about these is they give me that tailored, refined look, but they are easy to care for. And if they do get any pilling, I can easily use a fabric shaver to tidy them up and they look like new. I think a thing that's really interesting to me is looking back and noticing that between 2014 to 2019, I was largely resistant to trends because I was more kind of traveling in my own lane. I was focusing on the brands that I really liked, some very specific items, and while maybe some of those things were trends in a way, they were all classic trends. Whereas now I'm looking more so at the trends that are around, like color trends. Butter yellow, for example. I love yellow as a color, and I already have some yellow in my wardrobe. So I'm thinking about how I can bring that out for the spring summer season. Even red, I felt emboldened to add a red shirt into my wardrobe because that is something that's currently trendy, but I love red as a color. And so for me, this was just a great way to expand on my personal style repertoire. So I guess in some ways I am a little bit more susceptible, and I think part of that comes down to exposure, because I do spend more time, there's just more access on social media to lots of different ideas and conversations around what we're wearing. But there are a few things that have remained very, very consistent. One is that I love a fun, quirky shoe, and this is something that will never get old for me. I think it's a great way to sort of shift the focus of your outfit and make it feel more interesting. I mean, my Tory Burch Pierce Mules are a really great example of a shoe that is so dialed up and very kind of sculptural. I also really have always loved classic jewelry, and this has been a common theme, and this is kind of where Linjer comes in, and how their pieces that I was wearing 5 years ago are still ones that I want to wear today. And the fact that my Lise hoops, which I got when the jewelry collection launched in 2019, still look immaculate today, I think speaks volumes. The other thing that has been pretty consistent is that when I do like to wear print, ironically, I like to wear it on my lower half, despite the fact that I'm narrower up top and wider on my lower half, which is interesting because prints actually tend to emphasize, they draw focus. So you would want to use them in areas where you want to create more width, whereas I like to wear them on my lower half, and I always have. And I think that's because I don't want too much going on around my face. And this is just personally how I've always really liked to dress. Yeah, that is a little look at my style journey over the years. I hope that you enjoyed this video, this walk down memory lane. It's always kind of fun to go back and look on old pictures and have a little bit of laugh, and especially as someone who has been taking photos of their outfits for the longest time. I would love to know if a particular outfit or anything stood out to you, what your own style journey has looked like, if you've noticed that there have been kind of correlations between trends in society or the zeitgeist, and then how this has impacted your personal style. I realize now that the idea that I could buy something when I was 20 and have it in my wardrobe for a lifetime is a lie. It's a bit of a misconception because our bodies change. I could never expect to have been the same size at 20 that I am when I'm 60, because our body goes through so many changes. If you have children, you have that life change, and then we've also got the life change of going through menopause as well, when our body changes again. And you can't anticipate those things. And I think that's something that never really was impressed on me at a young age. So it's interesting to look back on my style through that lens. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap things up here. A huge thank you to Linjer for partnering with me on this video. As mentioned, I do have that discount code. I'm gonna have that on screen in the description box, so you can go and save a little bit more with their anniversary sale, along with links to all the pieces that I've featured. But thank you so much for joining me, for spending some of your day with me. I know that this was a really long one, so even more grateful than usual. But yeah, I will see you next time with a brand new video. See you soon. Bye.